I wanted to do a quick discussion of my experience having COVID in the tail end of December, and more specifically, what happened at the clinic I went to and why I went to that clinic and what the doctor said, as well as kind of the reactions of people around me when they found out I had COVID and some of the stuff that was going on. And so I'll quickly run through just kind of the symptoms and how it kind of led up to this point, and then we'll kind of get into what the doctor said and what's going on with some of the people around me. But basically what happened was, I was at a grocery store, kind of like midway through December, started to feel some body aches, and I was thinking, oh, yeah, my body feels a little weird, might be coming down with something. Ended up going home. Body aches continued throughout the day, had a little bit of a fever overnight, woke up the next day, felt like totally fine, like as if there was no issues whatsoever. So then about, I thought, hey, maybe it was gone. That was it. It was just some weird thing. But around 1 o'clock that next day, started to feel some of the body aches again, started to feel like my body was fighting something to some extent. So we canceled our Christmas plans that we were going to have and kind of just, did what we did. We were supposed to go out that day. So I was like, you know what? I don't know what I have here. We're going to be around some people that might be vulnerable. So might as well just wait it out, self-isolate, right? I don't want to be governed, so I'll be self-responsible and do what I need to do. I don't want the government telling me what to do. That's the type of individual I am, so I try and maintain self-responsibility. So, of course, you tell people and everybody starts reacting immediately, like, whoa, you have some symptoms, like you need to go get tested. You need to know what's going on. You need to know. And we're not talking about like, hey, just take an antigen test, which like, in the first or second day of you having symptoms, like it may not show up on an antigen test. I took an antigen test and it showed up as you have no COVID. So everybody was talking, you need to get in and get a PCR test. It just has to happen. Now, of course, interestingly enough, here in Ontario, the wait to get a PCR test because of the Omicron panic that was created from the local premier here, the wait to get a test was like 7 days. Like you could not go and get a test, like an actual up-the-nose PCR test where they take it to a lab, they spin it through cycles and tell you whether or not you got any sequencing from the actual virus. So again, we're not talking antigen tests here. We're talking real PCR tests. Couldn't get it, right? So I'm like, well, I can't get tested. I don't see the point of booking a test 7 days from now because the likelihood of me being over it in 7 days is decent. It could be around for 14 days. We'll see. Either way, if I get tested, well, what difference does it make, right? So the illness kind of just did what it did for the next couple of days, turned into migraines. I had 2 days of migraines. That was, not really that much fun. And then from the migraines, it kind of just turned into a little bit of abdominal pain and having fevers. I had fevers mainly in the evening / overnight period. Overnight, they would get up to about 103 or so. And typically that's a healthy immune response, just to be clear. That's something that people of my age should have. That's a good way of, the body immune system saying, hey, you're responding to this. And I've always been the type of person where I don't try and control my fevers. I don't take Tylenol or any of that kind of stuff. So I just let it ride, let the body do what it does. And the only challenge, though, is my whole life, I've not been able to sleep very well when I have fevers that high ever since I was a kid. And so what ends up happening is, you get these, your brain starts making up all these thoughts, all these weird things, almost being a little bit like, whoa, you're almost like, what do you call it? Hallucinating, but not quite. But that kind of feeling where you're like coming up with weird ideas in your head. So the challenge is that those fevers went on for about 7 days. So as they were going on, I was not able to really rest. And that's when I started to say, okay, I'm going to take a Tylenol to control these fevers so that I can rest, right? Because if I can't rest, how am I going to get over the actual illness itself? But, at first we didn't think that it was COVID. We thought that it was maybe just a flu or maybe just a cold or something like that because we didn't have many real telltale symptoms. Like I didn't have the loss of sense and smell. My wife also had this, which is why, I sometimes say we here, but I didn't have that yet. And it was just kind of like, oh yeah, it is what it is. I'm just more concerned, like, do I have some other type of infection, perhaps from, the alpacas in the alpaca barn, right? We have a little farm at home and, we're around different types of poop and all that kind of stuff. So it was like, hey, do I have something else going on here? So I was like, by the 9th day, right, of having, some symptoms plus fever, I decided like, you know what, this has gone on a little bit long in terms of the fever. Let's go to a clinic and just find out what's going on. So went to the clinic basically to make sure with the doctor, is there anything else this could be, right? And it was there. He was checking me, did the temperature, he checked my abdominal pain. He kind of just went through all this stuff. And he was like, look, he's like, you have all the symptoms of COVID. It's most likely COVID. And I'm like, is there anything else? It can be here, blah, blah, blah. Like, can I just get a requisition for a blood test just in case it is something else so that I can, in a few days, if these symptoms don't go away, I'll go get the blood test and, kind of move on. And he's like, yeah, he's like, no problem. But as he's looking me over, he's like, are you vaccinated? And I was like, no. And he's like, oh, see. And I'm like, what do you mean, like, see? Like, I'm in here. I came in here on my own accord. I don't have anything severe going on. For all you know, I have like a mild flu. Like, there's not a whole lot going on here. And the only time like I've been throwing up was when the migraines were so bad from the pain, you get nauseous. Otherwise, it's like, it's just been, I have fevers at night and I don't feel the greatest. So there was this like perception of like, if you were vaccinated, you wouldn't be here. But it's like, we know vaccinated people all over the place that are having mild symptoms. Like I was just very confused by this reaction. It's not like I came here to go to the hospital or I came here because, doc, I'm about to die. It's like I came here curious about what's going on. And so I found his reaction very interesting. And then the other piece to this that I found very interesting is when he finally said, hey, look, this is just COVID, he just said, go get a test. I'm thinking, go get a test? Like, why do I need to go get a test? And he's like, well, just in case contact tracing, whatever, like that. It's like, okay. And that was it. He ends the session. And I'm like, what, should I go sleep? Should I make sure I drink a certain amount of water? Should I make sure I eat certain things? Should I take any supplements? Like, what's the standard of care here? Nothing. So here we are almost 2 years into this pandemic, and the doctor is giving me 0 tips on standard of care. In fact, if you look around at most government policy and what they've been talking about, there is virtually no standard of care for COVID whatsoever. It's just, well, you should be vaccinated. And hey, I think Merck and Pfizer have some pills coming up that should be pretty good, even though the existing pharmaceuticals pretty much do the exact same thing that could be repurposed for this. And I'm not going to name any names, but that's all early treatment thrown in the garbage, all standard of care thrown in the garbage. Just go get vaccinated. And in my case, go get a test. So it's bizarre that that's the state of everything. But, I go home. I ended up having no symptoms virtually every symptom went away by day 11 or 12. And, kind of felt fine. Little things just tapered off. You eventually get your smell back, all that kind of stuff. And interestingly, though, it was like the reactions of people around me while I had COVID, like I said before, like, you got to get tested, you got to get tested, you got to get tested. Like, you need to know what this is. It's like, what's going to change if I know what this is, right? Not only that, but there were some people that were panicking about my situation. It's like, guys, I'm not that sick. Like, what is the panic? And it's because they saw something on the news, or they heard things over and over again, or they just been hearing cases, deaths, deaths over and over and over again for 2 years, that they suddenly believe this illness is a death sentence. And, this relates a lot to the, video I did yesterday, which talked about how the vast majority of people seem to be overestimating the actual risk from this virus. And you have to ask the question, how is that happening? And I won't get into what I covered entirely in the previous video. You can just go watch that. But I will talk very quickly. I'm going to bring this graph back up, which I talked in a lot more detail in the previous video. But if you look at it here, you can see when they asked people in the United States about the risk of hospitalization with unvaccinated people, they asked, independents, Democrats, and Republicans. On this graph, you can see that, a lot of people are overestimating the risk. The risk is less than 1% for unvaccinated people to end up in hospital if they get COVID. And, you're seeing here that if you kind of add up what I believe, this is my own perspective here, what is kind of pretty egregiously wrong. Like, if you're saying anywhere between 30 and 50+% chance that an unvaccinated person is going to end up in hospital with COVID, that's the rate of it. I would say that's pretty egregiously wrong. And if you take those two categories, you put them together, you're talking about like 37% of independents, 30% of Republicans, and 53% of Democrats are just egregiously wrong about these statistics and their assumption of risk. But if you were to look at anywhere between less than 1% to about 5%, which is, I think, a fairly accurate estimate, I would say you're pretty informed about what's going on. You have 30% of independents, 42% of Republicans, and 18% of Democrats. And you can kind of see, the glaring issue here is Democrats seem to be off by, when it comes to the risk of COVID, by just a massive margin. And of course, you have to ask the question, like, how? How did we get there? How is that happening? And it's really, look no further than the politicians and the media, right? Leftist media has most likely, and again, I'm not trying to pick on any particular political party here. I'm just looking at how our society and how people become misinformed, and then how that affects real life. And the media has been misinforming people into a sense of hysteria and fear for a very long time. And the reality is in this graph. Like, you're seeing people have absolutely no idea what the actual risk of COVID is. And as a result, they support very bad ideas that their government comes up with. And they look at unvaccinated people as if they're sick. And when I was sick, and a lot of people who watch a lot of mainstream media were talking to me, and were kind of in a state of panic, like, oh my God, like, you okay? Like, holy shit, like, you need to get a test, you need to get a test, you need to get a test. It's like, guys, if I take the test and I put it in my nose and I find out I have COVID, it doesn't mean I magically get better. Like, there's no medicine on the test. It's like, it doesn't matter. I'm a healthy, young person, thankfully, and I can, do what I need to do, and my body's gonna get over it. And that's what's gonna happen for 99% of us on this planet. But again, the risk, or the hysteria has created a very real situation where people are just massively out of touch. And then this leads to the final sort of reflection point, which is, this is not the first issue, COVID, where people are massively out of touch with the reality about it. And it begs this question: how can you have a democratic process? How can you have a meaningful situation where people are making decisions, engaging with conversation about what's going on in the world, when the vast majority of them are completely misinformed about what is actually happening? These people that are not even close to an understanding of what's happening with COVID are going to be voting. They're going to have a say over what should happen. They're going to be polled about what should happen with vaccine mandates. And those polls are going to show, 58% of Canadians, 58% of Americans believe that the unvaccinated should end up in jail, or believe that the unvaccinated should be confined to their homes. Well, yeah, those same 58% of people have absolutely no idea what the risk of COVID is for those unvaccinated people. Why are these people allowed to vote? I'm not saying this as in people shouldn't have the right to vote. I'm saying, when we are this misinformed, we cannot offer meaningful contributions to society. And again, there's tons of issues that we are massively misinformed on, not because of independent media, not because of anti-vaxxers, but because of mainstream media and politicians. Democracy is only ever going to be as good as the people are actually informed about reality. So a lot of this comes back to, if we can't have quality media, if we can't have truth, if people can't make sense of reality around us, there's not much of a real democratic process going on, because we're just being manipulated to support or make decisions based on the falsehoods coming out of mass media and politicians' mouths. So it's a very tricky situation. Anyway, hope you enjoyed some of this discussion here. Would love to hear your feedback in the comments. If you haven't checked out the previous videos to this, I highly recommend that you do. I think that's the very last one, the one before that, are interesting discussions around some of this stuff. And yeah, that's all. Thanks so much for being here. And if you're new, please subscribe.